In a luxury hotel in Geneva, Luca, a quiet and seemingly unremarkable bellhop, surprises everyone when he reveals his fluency in 10 languages during a chaotic international incident. Misjudged for years due to his silence and humble position, Luca steps into the spotlight to bridge cultural divides and salvage a high-stakes global conference. As his talents reshape the perception of overlooked workers, Luca discovers that being silent doesn't mean being invisible, and that sometimes the most fluent voices are the ones we never heard coming. Geneva, Switzerland, a city of diplomacy, banking, and silent elegance. Inside the towering glass facade of Hotel Étoile, the marble lobby gleamed like a museum, polished, precise, expensive. Guests strolled in dragging sleek luggage, some in suits, some in sweatpants, or with an air of importance. In the middle of it all, almost blending into the furniture, was Luca. Dressed in the standard bellhop uniform, navy vest, silver name tag, white gloves, he moved with calm efficiency. No chatter, no flair, just quiet presence. He rolled carts of Louis Vuitton bags, held elevator doors, nodded politely when spoken to. Most guests didn't even catch his name. To them, he was just the guy with the trolley. Even some colleagues didn't know much about him. Luca, yeah, nice guy, the front desk clerk once said. Keeps to himself, bit odd. Never talks unless he has to. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Luca was always listening, not just to footsteps or ringing phones. He listened to languages, to tonal shifts in Korean, to the rhythm of Egyptian Arabic, to the clipped syllables of German, to the lyrical flow of Portuguese. He didn't just hear them, he understood them. The chaos started with a missing suitcase. It was just after noon on a Thursday, 2 days before the International Travel and Hospitality Summit, one of Geneva's most high-profile annual conferences. Hotel Étoile was at full capacity, hosting delegations from over a dozen countries. Security was tight tempers, short, and the concierge phones didn't stop ringing. Then the Emirati delegation arrived. 5 men in traditional Honduras stepped into the lobby with calm dignity until one of them discovered his diplomatic briefcase was missing. It contained contracts, clearance papers, and documents that couldn't simply be reprinted. The tension was instant. The concierge panicked. The front desk scrambled. The translator, apparently caught in weather delays, was still in Milan, and no one on staff spoke Arabic well enough to help. In the swirl of frustration and raised voices, Luca stood at the edge of the lobby unnoticed. He was holding a clipboard and a room key, halfway through delivering a welcome gift to a guest. But he stopped, listened. He could hear the panic behind the formal words, words like misplaced, urgent, and security breach. He stepped forward, slowly, drawing no attention. Then in a voice that was low but clear, he spoke. Afwan hal kuntum taqsidun al-hakiba as-sauda bil-misaddat al-kabira. Excuse me, were you referring to the black suitcase with the large silver lock? The room stilled. The eldest delegate blinked, turning to Luca in surprise. He responded in rapid Arabic, asking who Luca was, how he knew, and where the suitcase was last seen. Luca answered fluently, calmly, precisely. He explained that he'd seen the suitcase earlier on a cart mistakenly routed to the business lounge. He offered to retrieve it personally. 15 minutes later, he returned with the case intact, hands folded, expression unreadable. The Emirati guest clutched the suitcase like it contained his entire government, which in a way it did. Then came the murmurs. Did he just speak Arabic fluent, I think? Who is he? The Emirati delegation hadn't even reached their suites before word began to spread. Luca the bellhop, the quiet one, had handled a diplomatic incident like a seasoned liaison. In Arabic, no script, no Google Translate, just poised clarity and cultural grace. Management called a quick meeting behind the front desk. Who is this guy really? Has he worked with embassies before? Should we test him? They didn't need to. The next test came all on its own. An hour later, a German guest arrived frustrated and sleep-deprived from a delayed flight. He was trying to confirm a room upgrade, but the receptionist on shift couldn't keep up. The guest raised his voice, his words tumbling too fast for anyone to follow. From across the lobby, Luca glanced up. He stepped in gently, speaking in smooth, measured German. Entschuldigen Sie, darf ich helfen? Es gab eine Änderung in Ihrer Reservierung. Ich werde sie sofort aktualisieren. Excuse me, may I assist? There was a change in your reservation. I'll update it immediately. The man blinked, startled, and nodded in gratitude. Conversation continued for 2 more minutes entirely in German. By now, a few staff members were openly watching. Then came the Japanese couple who couldn't find the spa entrance. Luca bowed slightly, responded in polite Japanese, and personally guided them to the elevator, explaining which amenities were included in their package. He switched again an hour later, giving directions in Portuguese to a Brazilian wine distributor. By the end of the afternoon, Luca had spoken 6 languages publicly without hesitation. Word reached the general manager by sunset. She summoned Luca to the operations office, a space lined with hotel awards risk logs and a dozen clocks set to international time zones. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, the kind who preferred spreadsheets to small talk. Luca, she said, folding her arms, would you care to explain how a bellhop knows how to speak? What 5, 6 languages? He stood quietly, unsure whether he was in trouble. 10, he said softly. She raised an eyebrow. 10. He nodded. Arabic, German, French, Italian, English, Japanese, Mandarin, Portuguese, Russian, and Swahili, and some ASL. She stared at him like she'd just heard the marble floor speak. Why haven't you ever told anyone? He looked down. No one ever asked. By Friday morning, Hotel Etoile was no longer whispering about Luca. They were buzzing, the kitchen staff, concierge, even visiting delegates. Everyone had a version of the story. The bellhop who spoke 10 languages, the quiet man who rescued a diplomatic blunder with the calm of a seasoned interpreter. Some said he must have worked for the UN. Others claimed he was ex-intelligence. But none of them knew the truth. Only Luca did. So when the general manager's assistant knocked on the staff lounge door and said, Luca, the director of operations, wants to see you, he didn't flinch. He just wiped his hands on his uniform, nodded, and followed. Upstairs in a sleek executive office that overlooked Lake Geneva, the director of international guest relations, a polished man named Julien Lambert, greeted him with a corporate smile and a curious gleam in his eyes. Luca, we've noticed you. Julien gestured for him to sit, then slid a glossy folder across the desk. Inside was the full itinerary of the upcoming International Travel and Hospitality Summit. Delegations from Morocco, Japan, Argentina, and several European tourism boards were scheduled to attend. Julien laced his fingers. We've just lost our lead multilingual coordinator. Illness, very poor timing. We were about to hire an outside agency. Until your name came up, Luca said nothing. Here's what I'm proposing. Julien continued. You serve as a liaison during the conference. Not just translation, navigation, coordination, cultural mediation. You'll be in direct contact with VIPs. A pause. Temporary, of course. Trial basis. Still Luca was silent. Julien leaned forward. You're not obligated, but in all honesty, we could really use you. You have a gift. Luca looked down at his gloves. The same ones he wore every day, scuffed from luggage carts and elevator buttons. "I'll do it," he said quietly. An hour later, he was fitted for a new suit, not a bellhop vest, a tailored navy blue blazer, white dress shirt, soft gray tie. His name badge was updated Luca Romano, multilingual liaison. By evening, he was standing behind a podium in one of the hotel's grand conference halls, preparing for the first roundtable meeting between the Japanese Tourism Ministry and a French delegation. He looked out at the sea of unfamiliar faces. None of them had ever pushed a luggage cart. None of them had ever noticed him in the hallway. Until now. The room settled. He took a breath. Then he opened the meeting in flawless Japanese. Success, as it turns out, is rarely silent. By the second day of the summit, Luca was everywhere, sitting at negotiation tables, guiding diplomats to breakout rooms, even stepping in to resolve a misunderstanding between a Greek hotel chain and a Swedish delegation with nothing but a whiteboard and a trilingual diagram he sketched in 30 seconds. He didn't show off, he didn't linger. He simply delivered clarity and disappeared again. But not everyone celebrated. In the staff cafeteria, murmurs simmered beneath trays of croissants and paper coffee cups. "He's not even trained for this," one assistant manager whispered. "I have a master's in hospitality and haven't been invited to a single summit session," grumbled another. "Let's be honest, he's a bellhop with a party trick." Others were more subtle, cold glances, exclusion from team memos. A few department heads began double-checking his translations behind his back. Even Julien Lambert, the polished director who had once smiled with possibility, began to show signs of distance. Luca noticed. He wasn't naive. He just chose not to confront it yet. But the pressure came to a head when a senior partner from the hotel's global board, Madame Véronique Dumas, unexpectedly attended one of Luca's morning sessions. She was old-school French sharp-line suits, sharper instincts. After the session, she asked to see him privately. In a small boardroom, she shut the door quietly. "Mr. Romano," she began, glancing down at a file in her hand, "you have no university degree, no formal training in cross-cultural diplomacy, and until 4 days ago, your job was pushing luggage." Luca stood calmly, hands folded. "That's correct." Veronique peered at him. "You are fluent in 10 languages, yet spent years moving suitcases instead of advancing professionally." Why he didn't blink? Because no one ever asked what I knew. They just looked at what I wore. A pause. "And do you believe that speaking 10 languages qualifies you to guide international partnerships?" Luca looked her straight in the eye. "No, but understanding people does. Language is just how I open the door." For a moment, Veronique said nothing. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out a single document. "This," she said, sliding it across the table, "is a memo to the board recommending the creation of a permanent cultural liaison office at Hotel Étoile." He looked down. Underneath the official header was his name. The memo was real. By the next morning, Luca's new title appeared on the hotel's internal staff directory, Luca Romano, Director of Cultural Liaison, Hotel Étoile. The announcement wasn't made in a press release or ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was a quiet update tucked between meeting reminders and security notices. But people noticed. At the summit's final gala held in the hotel's grand ballroom, beneath chandeliers and golden latticework, Luca wasn't standing by the door in uniform. He was at table 4, seated between the Moroccan tourism delegate and a Swedish logistics CEO, both mid-discussion on potential partnerships. Luca translated fluently, calmly, moving between Arabic, French, and English, weaving phrases with cultural sensitivity and grace. He didn't just convert words, he bridged intention. Then came the unexpected. The hotel's general manager walked onto the stage, tapping the mic gently. Before we close tonight's program, she said, I'd like to recognize someone whose quiet brilliance has redefined what it means to serve. She paused. Luca Romano, would you please stand? Luca froze for a second. The ballroom turned. Dozens of faces, the same ones that had ignored him in the elevators or handed him keys without eye contact, were now watching. Waiting, he rose slowly. Applause began scattered at first, then rising into a standing ovation. Julian Lambert clapped. Veronique Dumas gave a single approving nod. Even the Emirati delegate, the one whose missing suitcase had started it all, stood with his hand over his chest in a traditional gesture of respect. Luca didn't speak. He didn't need to. After the event, as guests filtered out and the string quartet packed up their instruments, a young intern approached him in the hallway. She was barely 20, new to the job, and had watched Luca show all week with quiet admiration. How did you learn all those languages, she asked. He smiled gently, one word at a time. 2 weeks after the summit, the hotel corridors felt different. Not louder, not busier, but more aware. Staff members who used to rush past the laundry carts now nodded greetings. Housekeepers spoke up more in staff meetings. Kitchen runners shared their backgrounds over lunch instead of hiding behind quick yes sirs. It started with one initiative. Luca called it Voices Unseen, a training program co-developed with Veronique and the HR director designed to identify and mentor multilingual, multicultural talents from within the hotel's support staff, not from glossy resumes or networking events, but from the people already working there. Porters, maintenance workers, night cleaners, line cooks. The application was simple. What languages do you know? What cultures do you understand? What have you never been asked about? The first week, 23 people signed up. By month's end, the number had tripled. Luca personally mentored several trainees, none of whom had ever been given a platform. A shy pastry chef from Tunisia who spoke perfect Italian, a dishwasher who had quietly translated for her Haitian grandparents since she was 10, a security guard who knew sign language in 3 dialects. Don't polish your accent, Luca told them. Polish your confidence. One afternoon, while reviewing training materials, Julian Lambert dropped by Luca's office. He stood awkwardly by the doorway. I was wrong, Julian admitted. I didn't think you belonged at that table. Luca didn't look up from his notes, but his voice was calm. A lot of people didn't. Julian shifted. But you've built something. And the board noticed. He handed Luca a letter, official stationery. Inside, an invitation to speak at the European Hospitality Innovation Forum in Vienna. The keynote slot. His story had reached the top. In Vienna, Luca stood backstage wearing a tailored gray suit and a simple lapel pin bearing 10 tiny flags, each representing a language he spoke. He stared at the packed auditorium, his fingers wrapped gently around the speech he had written himself. Then he stepped up to the podium. The room hushed. A few months ago, he began, I was invisible. Not because I had nothing to say, but because no one thought to listen. He looked out at a sea of executives, hotel owners, and international delegates. People say language is power, but that's not quite right. Language is connection. And when you ignore someone's voice just because of what they wear or where they stand, you disconnect your company from its greatest strength, your people, he paused. I wasn't just carrying luggage. I was carrying 10 languages, 20 cultures, and a lifetime of listening. A beat. So the next time someone walks past you in silence, ask yourself, what brilliance are you walking away from? He stepped back. Silence, then applause. Thunderous, lasting. Back at Hotel Etoile, a new brass plaque was installed outside the training room on the ground floor, the Romano room dedicated to the quiet voices that move the world.